Okay. Hello and welcome to... Now, आप चालू कर ही दो.
Hello and welcome to PowerDrift. Today is a good day because we have two motorcycles. The Royal Enfield Himalayan, and this is the brand new Royal Enfield Scram 411. And basically what we're trying to answer in this video, so do stay tuned till the end, is there's about 10,000 rupees between this and this, especially once the introductory pricing is gone.
Correct.
Should you get that or should you get this?
Yeah, and I think question number one, we'll straight get to the point. What is the difference between the Himalayan and the Scram? The mechanical difference is zero, because essentially it's the same 411 unit that you see on the Himalayan that's been on the Scram. But what Royal Enfield have done is actually put in a new map. So that feels a lot smoother to ride.
Yes.
This is, and what Royal Enfield has also done is gotten the new map to newer Himalayans, which means the Himalayans that are going out in the market right now will get the new smoother map. So this one, which we got last year, does not have. So there's a distinction between the two in terms of feel.
Yeah, if you're riding a slightly older Himalayan, the Scram is a smoother motorcycle than that. But if you're buying a Himalayan now, you'll more or less get the same vibration level, and it's very, very well controlled now.
That's correct.
Not the industry standard, but pretty decent.
Pretty decent.
But I think the biggest difference between these two motorcycles is that the Himalayan has more inches in the front.
I knew this was coming.
The wheel, I'm talking about the wheel.
I knew this was happening.
So that's a 21. And this is a 19.
That's correct.
And as I always like to say, it's not how many inches have you got, it's what you do with it. And that should tell you what the focus of the two motorcycles is in terms of role.
Correct.
Okay. I think finally we can say that at this end of the market, it's difficult to differentiate a large part because the performance envelope itself is quite small. But that's more like a travel enduro now.
Yeah.
And this is more like a fun thing that you take off-roading a little bit. Both will primarily spend their lives on tarmac. They will be commuting, they will be out on the highways touring and all of that. But if you wanted to go off-road, what do you think will go better?
Honestly, in a normal world, you will feel that a 21-inch will do a better job and the 19-inch will not be as good as a 21. But honestly, I had a lot more fun on the Scram. I mean, both of these are essentially dual-purpose motorcycles, will do the job well.
Right.
But that just feels a lot nicer to ride. I think when you just pair up a few things together, 19-inch front, the suspension is something that I like, slightly lighter when you're going off-road. So in that sense, for me, this feels a lot easier to ride off-road, personally.
And I was talking to Rishi Manke, the stunting god.
Correct.
And he was saying that when they went off-roading back-to-back with the Himalayan and the Scram, they found that the Scram, when you start pushing the limit, washes out a lot later than the Himalayan. So in that sense, the off-road capability does seem to be better here, although the 21 will get deflected less. So on a technical trail with a lot of rocks, the Himalayan might have a slightly easier time than the Scram. But everything that I've read, especially from you, what I've heard from Manke yesterday, this bike seems to do better off-road. The only challenge being the side panel design.
Yeah, I mean...
which is sort of like this. So it sticks out beyond the frame. So when you try to grip the motorcycle, there's not a lot between your knees.
Correct.
The Himalayan panel is relatively flat and it sits inside the frame, so you can grip the tank a lot better. But that solution is not complicated. Get the Himalayan side panel, add it back to the Scram, and you'll more or less have a solution to a problem.
One of the questions that we want to answer is, and I think this is coming a lot from you guys as well, what makes the Himalayan a good or a great motorcycle?
I would never ascribe the word great to the Himalayan. For that, it needed to have 5 bhp more. It's something that I think I started saying before my hair turned grey, and I'm still saying it, and it's still not got 5 bhp more.
No, not yet.
But I think fundamentally, it always projects the idea that if you went faster, you'd have a better time, and the engine doesn't have the wherewithal to do it with. But what is really nice about the Himalayan is that the package works.
Yeah.
So you've got a low seat height, you've got a comfortable seat, upright ergonomics, an engine that is reasonably comfortable at 100 kilometers an hour. It's not a difficult motorcycle to ride. So in your head, you're saying, I used to ride a 150, I need to go to a 400. This is the easiest 400 on the market to ride. The Scram has all of those abilities, but it feels lighter and a little bit more compact. So it's perhaps a little bit even easier than the Himalayan. I think that is the quality that both of these motorcycles have. And I would say test ride and decide which one you like more. And I suspect a lot of people will gravitate towards this. Because that screen, it does provide some wind protection at speed on the highway. But remember, these are not really fast motorcycles. It's not really that big a deal.
Wind blast should not ideally be an issue.
I think also I would like to add here that Royal Enfield's big challenge with these two motorcycles is that they've really raised the game on all of their other motorcycles. So if you go to a Royal Enfield showroom today and check out the 650s or the new 350s, they're all very good now.
Yeah.
Right? These stick out in that context. So they've always been good motorcycles, but now they look worse because everything else has become better, especially within the showroom from where they're sold.
Correct. I think one of the questions that popped up on our first ride video as well was, this does not look like a scrambler. But what is a scrambler? I mean, you know, if you have to ask yourself that question, what is a scrambler? Essentially, they are chops in a way.
I would say that they're not wrong, okay? For two reasons. One, the whole idea of scrambling and cafe racing both came from a point where there were only street motorcycles. The first scramblers predated what we know as dirt bikes today, right? The dirt bikes came, I think, about 15 years after the first scramblers came out. And the scramblers didn't come out of manufacturers, they came out of people's garages, right? Where the scramble is a British idea of an event where you go from point A to point B and whatever is on the path, the bike has to take, right? So if there's a hill, there is a water crossing, whatever it is. And the motorcycles were slowly tuned to do that job, and that split into what became more like dirt biking, NMX, and what became trials, where the motorcycles became more specialized. And in that sense, that they've taken the Himalayan and turned it into a scrambler is more or less how it was back in the day, except that back in the day, all the motorcycles looked like a certain format. So in our head, the scrambler is of certain format, and look at the Yazdi scrambler.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wonderful looking motorcycle, it's a very proportionate motorcycle, and in your head, that's what scramblers look like, because in the early, 50s, this is what scramblers were like. So from that perspective, design-wise, it's not really a scrambler.
Not really.
But if you start reading websites like BikeXF, who are very aware of what the design sensibilities for motorcycles like these are, you'll slowly realize that while a cafe racer has a very well-defined format, scramblers usually don't.
Yeah. Interesting enough, the reason why Royal Enfield started this project was because when the Himalayan came out, a lot of these custom shops took the Himalayan, stripped it down, and made their own version of a scrambler.
Yeah.
So Royal Enfield, who have their own custom thing going on, they looked at all these designs and said, hey, you know what, there's a market for the scrambler.
Yeah.
And that's when they decided to go back to the drawing board and said, you know what, we'll create a scrambler out of our own factory. The problem is they decided to start this project in 2020, right before COVID started. So it's taken them a long time to get this on the road, and that's why probably this feels slightly delayed, especially when a new 450cc Himalayan is on its way. This might feel slightly delayed. I agree with that.
Yeah, in fact, I was looking at the paint schemes on this bike and the paint scheme on the leaked picture of the 450. And I'm no longer convinced that that new motorcycle is a Himalayan. I'm thinking that motorcycle is a Scram. Because if you look at the way that design works, if you look at, for example, the lack of a screen and stuff, it reminds me of this a lot more than it reminds me of that. So I have a feeling, and this is just me being me, that new motorcycle may not be the new Himalayan, it might be the new Scram. And therefore the question next, obviously, is what happens to the Himalayan?
Yeah, exactly. What happens to the Himalayan is probably, it's sort of at the end of its life because the news is already out there. And I think it's pretty old now as well. 6 years in the business with its newest form feeling the best. I think it's quite old, and the engine also does not have that feel anymore. This is a classic case of platform sharing. And with this settling in, I think the Himalayan will have to take 2 steps back and maybe get into a newer form, which is obviously going to happen very soon.
What form do you think the Himalayan needs to take next? If we assume that the new 450 liquid-cooled engine is going into a motorcycle that looks more or less like this one, a scrambler, what kind of form, engine size, etc. should Royal Enfield be thinking about for the new Himalayan? Tell us in the comments.
But moving on to the next bit, the Scram is already here. What do you think can be changed on the Scram?
I would like the water purifier on this motorcycle removed.
No. We'll tell you why.
No, because it says RO on the side.
Yeah.
If it had said RE, I would have understood it. But it says RO, which in our terminology is a way to make clean water. I understand design liberties, but I think I'm not a fan of this idea. But what I would change on this motorcycle, and some of it Royal Enfield will do anyway, is that this is a early production prototype, so it has a few glitches here and there. So this little cowl in front of the tank is not evenly centered. For example, this handlebar is mounted a little bit off center on this particular machine. I would want the mirror to be changed to a better quality mirror because it rotates only in one axis, which means any serious adjustment and you have to start opening nuts and bolts, which for a motorcycle worth 2 lakh rupees, honestly, we shouldn't be doing. I also don't like the seat shape because the way the hump is between the step, it's sort of shapeless. I wish it was more shaped. If you look at the Himalayan step, which is obviously a two-piece seat, but it's a very clean, defined shape. This is an undefined shape. When the seat foam becomes undefined, it destroys your lines a little bit. So I think that is an area of improvement. Both of these frames have ugly welds here and there, which Royal Enfield should honestly have fixed by now.
Yeah,
but they're still there.
So too.
And that aside, Royal Enfield is making pretty decent machines. But I think this engine now is old enough and it needs to be upgraded. All right, Varun, the weakest link in the Himalayan equation is the brakes.
Yeah.
They feel weak on the road.
Yeah.
But this has the same brakes.
Yeah, same unit.
But if Royal Enfield could have changed the engine map and brought smoothness to this bike and rolled it back out to the Himalayan, why couldn't they just upgrade the brakes on both the bikes?
Yeah, so once this is the base motorcycle, and that's from this is where the Scram's being originated, right? The Himalayan inherently might be a good road motorcycle, but it's a better motorcycle off-road as well.
Okay.
These brakes might work okay on the road, but they work great off-road. And the thing with off-road is you want the brakes to have a slightly softer feel.
Okay.
Because if you're going off-road and if you say encounter something that you don't want to encounter, and if you smash the brakes, the chances are that you're going to fall. And softer brakes will help ease out that process.
Okay.
And that's why these brakes are incorporated into that. Could they have been better at the cost of cost? Yes, for sure, because this is a more road-oriented version. End of the day, the Scram also has the ability to go off-road, which is quite enjoyable. So keeping the brakes the absolute same, giving the absolute same feel, made a lot of sense.
I disagree. I think the brake should have been upgraded. And what about this bike having its abs always on?
Oh yeah, that is an even bigger problem, because if they can do it on the Himalayan, then why not do it on the Scram? And honestly, when I rode it during the first ride off-road, I seriously missed the feeling of locking the rear wheel. I mean, you are off-road, you want the rear wheel to lock, you want to tighten into a corner, you want to have that little bit of freedom in terms of how you want to or how much you want to get the brakes right. But just, I understand, yeah, not having the same console means not having the same button, and that's why the ABS cannot be switched off at the rear. But it's just a matter of a button. Royal Enfield said they could have done it, but they chose consciously not to. That's a big problem for me.
Okay, so if we are platform sharing, Varun, why didn't this console, which we are obviously finding much cleaner to look at than the Himalayan's multiple pod console, why didn't this also go there?
I think Royal Enfield wants to keep the Himalayan as the Himalayan and the Scram as the Scram. But I would have loved to see that console come here, because when you ride this motorcycle, I mean, you're obviously not looking at the console, but when you do, it's just a cleaner, smarter setup, more futuristic, and it suits that personality. Having this might suit the Himalayan's personality, but this is just too cluttered, and when you have this windscreen up front, it's just too many things going on.
Okay, let's talk about how the motorcycles feel to ride.
Yeah.
What's the ride quality difference between the two?
So this is a slightly softer setup. I quite enjoy this. That's a slightly firmer setup. I quite enjoy that as well.
Hey!
The internals have been revised. So honestly, when we started off the ride, we rode for about a good 60 kilometers on the highway. And this just felt easier, nicer on the road than the Himalayan. The Himalayan feels slightly softer. There's this slight feedback that's constantly going on, but that just feels a whole lot settled.
Yeah, I think we're splitting hair here, because remember that the Himalayan is not an uncomfortable motorcycle by any stretch of the imagination.
It's not.
This is just a little bit more settled because the suspension is a little bit more stiff, and that spring rating has not gone back to the Himalayan.
No, it's not.
So when you ride them in the showroom, always test ride and decide. When you ride them back to back in the showroom, that's one of the things to pay attention to, because there is a slight difference, but it adds up.
Yeah,
this will feel stiffer but not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That will feel softer and very comfortable, but is that your cup of tea?
Yeah. The biggest change, of course, is the downsizing of the front wheel, and that definitely affects handling.
It does.
Why do you think this feels a better motorcycle to ride?
So I think just the fact that it has a smaller wheel setup gives you more feedback from the wheel, so you feel more connected. It also makes the motorcycle feel a little bit closer to the ground. So numerically this may not compute, but it does feel lower to the ground, and if you're a new rider, that will bring a little bit more confidence, so it's not a bad thing. And it's not a 17, so whatever off-road ability you're going to get from a larger front tire, it will still have. So I think in terms of balance, it's a reasonable balance to pick.
Correct.
The further off-road you want to go, the more that 21 will come into play, but I think this will go very far off-road before you think that no.
I 100% agree.
Also, do you think you will be able to swap this and that if you really wanted to?
can. I mean, you can. I mean, there will be someone who has that Kida in his head or her head and says, I'm going to do this, and there will be a nice video on YouTube about this. But I think if it's possible, yeah, I mean, there is someone out there who will do it.
What would you call it? The him scram or the scram him?
I will choose not to answer that.
He's a total scram. I can't even take a stand. Okay. Handling we've talked about, ride quality we've talked about, brakes we've talked about. Let's talk about pricing.
Yeah. So 203 for that, about 214-15 for the Himalayan.
Let's call it 10,000 rupees.
Yeah, but that's the introductory price. The top variant costs about 2,08,000 rupees.
Without the center stand.
Without the center stand. And I think adding a center stand, I'm sure a lot of people will add an engine guard, a leg guard, whatever you add. So when you add that, pricing is going to be sort of similar. I think there should have been a distinction. When I said in the first ride video, it should be closer to the 2 lakh mark and not as introductory. That should have been the final price, because that would have made the Scram and the Himalayan, because then you're cannibalizing sales anyway.
Strategically, it's clear that Royal Enfield is saying, hey, listen, if you walk into my showroom and pick one of these two motorcycles, I am okay. If you assume that the Himalayan end of the market will not grow by a significant amount, but the sales will switch to the Scram, it adds up, because if this motorcycle is the one that's going to be replaced by the 450 single, then the Himalayan needs to vacate its position, and whatever replaces the Himalayan 411 needs to come in and do whatever it is going to do. So in that sense, it computes. So would it have been easier for customers to decide if there was a bigger price difference? For sure.
Yeah.
Right. But the fact that they haven't done that is a very interesting thing, because I think, just like we said with the Classic, because there were so many things that we thought the Classic should have been doing and it didn't do, but the Classic is one of the 350s. Right? The Meteor was the first, the Classic was the second, now we'll see the others come. In the same way, I think this is about to evolve, and we'll see where the Himalayan goes next, because it's pretty clear where the Scram is headed.
Yeah, sure.
It's not clear where the Himalayan is going. I think the price is the first indication that the Himalayan is about to change something significant.
Yeah. One last thing that I want to add is there are no options for alloys as well. And I think that's also, and I'm saying this right now because it's a matter of adding cost, but adding cost also adds convenience, because the kind of market that the Scram is targeted, you're targeting the youth. Look at the colors, look at the way it's designed and stuff like that. And as a 20-year-old, maybe a 22-year-old, I don't want to be stranded with a puncture, especially with
But you'll have fresh water.
Anyway, that's the thing that I wanted to add. But that's the story of the Scram, and that's the story of the Himalayan.
But wait, do you think the MIY program also doesn't have alloys on the Scrambler?
Unfortunately, no.
No plan also?
No plan also.
Okay.
And
Royal Enfield, maybe you want to think about that. So I would really suggest Royal Enfield that maybe the MIY program needs to offer alloys for this and that, because if you're not going off-road, if you're just using them as commuters and they're nice commuters, then maybe I want a tubeless tire and the little weight reduction and all of that comes from it. And MIY's whole point is to be able to personalize.
Yes.
And if I don't want spokes, give me the option.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, the Classic 350 long term that we have at PowerDrift, the first thing that we changed was change the spokes to alloys. So that's the market that obviously they should be targeting. But that's the story of the Scram, and that's the story of the Himalayan. Which one would you pick? Drop us your answer in the comments. And we'll be back with another video where the Scram 411 will go up against the Scrambler from ESD. That should be very interesting. In case you do not want to miss out on that, please do remember to hit the notification bell. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, then you know what to do. See you soon.
Bye-bye, fanboys.
आने वाले comments.
Cut.
ठीक है, good. Cut.